are delighted to join forces tonight with the City of Lake Forest and the Lake Forest Caucus to sponsor this panel discussion this evening. I think decisions get made every day in government at all levels, but particularly at the state and local levels that affect all of us in our lives, certainly in the community of Lake Forest, on this campus and elsewhere. And so it's very important, I think, that we provide this opportunity for all of you to engage with these important leaders tonight and ask questions about things that are important to you and that they can help us with. I'm particularly pleased to introduce our three panelists who are here so far. Those are State Attorney General Lisa Madigan, our alumna, I start with that, and State Senator Susan Gov't, President of the Lake Forest Caucus, Connie Maines, and we are waiting on Arlington Heights Mayor Arlene Mulder, whom we hope will get here very soon. But I'm going to take this opportunity also shamelessly to put in a plug for the college's sesquicentennial, our 150th anniversary that's going to begin on January 1st, 2007. And there will be a whole range of events over the course of next year that we hope all of you in the community will come to and join us with. And for all of you who are Lake Forest residents and receive the Lake Forest City Bulletin that comes in your mail, you'll begin seeing a listing of those events as an easy resource for you to get to and know what's happening here on campus. But with that, it is now my pleasure to introduce our mayor, Mayor Mike Rummel of Lake Forest, who is going to say a little bit more about this evening.
Thank you, President Scott. I think we have a tag team act, as we've been doing this before. We appreciate the many contributions Lake Forest College has made to the historical, educational, and cultural fabric of our community. So thank you for your hospitality tonight, Steve. For those of you who have heard our act before, because I've spoken to the freshman class several times, I believe it's a civic obligation to give back to your community. And it's under that guise that we put this forum together, because I think it's important to get people excited and energized about serving their community. We are very excited this evening to have three dynamic women in government that will share their experiences and suggestions for women interested in becoming involved in public service. Today, as in the past, Lake Forest has had bright, energetic women serve on our city council, boards, commissions. Tonight, we'd like to talk about opportunities that exist today for women to continue in this tradition. Our first speaker is Illinois Attorney General Lisa Madigan. She was elected to this office in November of 2002 and is the first woman to hold this position. As the state's chief legal officer, she's an advocate for the people of Illinois, protecting their public interests, safeguarding communities, and preserving our environment. She has worked hard to ensure that Illinois communities are safe and that state government is more open and accessible. Before her election as Attorney General, she served in the Illinois Senate, actually came into the Senate at the same time Susan was down in the state legislature, and worked as a litigator for a little Chicago law firm. Prior to becoming an attorney, Ms. Madigan worked as a teacher and community advocate, developing after-school programs to help kids stay away from drugs and gangs. Our next speaker is State Senator Susan Gov't. She took office as state senator representing the 29th District in 2003. Prior to serving in the Senate, she served 2 terms in the Illinois House. She serves on the State Government Health and Human Services, Education, Transportation, and Appropriation Committees. This year, she introduced legislation to limit the use of eminent domain, and her priorities for this year includes more complete funding for teachers' pensions and the safety of our water supply. Susan also continues to focus on the quality of life issues, including the maximum education funding, more accessible health care, and well-planned community development. She has been the forefront of government ethics reform and led the fight to post votes for the state legislature on the internet. Our next speaker, who is not here yet, is Mayor Arlene Mulder of the Village of Arlington Heights. Ms. Mulder has been the mayor of Arlington Heights since 1993. Over the years, she has gained the respect of numerous other elected officials for her talent, dedication, and ability to effectively build consensus to address difficult issues. In fact, in 1997, she was elected by other local government leaders in the Chicago area to serve as the chairman of the Air Noise Compatibility Commission, created to help solve the aircraft noise problem at the world's busiest airport. She has been reelected to that position every year and is now an internationally recognized leader on the issue of aircraft noise mitigation. Ms. Mulder is the vice president of the Illinois Municipal League and has served on its legislative and public safety committees. She has served as a trustee of the Educational Board of the U.S. Conference of Mayors and Chicago Metropolitan Mayors Caucus, and here she is right now as I'm introducing her, as well as a member of the Metro Board. Connie Maines, the last speaker, is a president of the Lake Forest Caucus and will round out our panel discussion by telling us about the caucus, who they are, what they do, and how important they are to Lake Forest. Over 70 years, the Lake Forest Caucus has served as a forum to attract qualified and willing candidates to serve on the city's boards and commissions. Let me stress at this time the caucus is neither a political party nor a policy-making branch of any unit of local government. It is nonpartisan as the purpose of this evening's program. And finally, resident attorney Susan Franzetti, who also serves on the Lake Forest Caucus, will act as our moderator during the questions and answer portion of this evening's program. Following the program, we'll have a chance to visit further in Reed Hall, so please join us next door for more conversation. So on behalf of the City of Lake Forest and the caucus, we welcome you.
Do you want us to go up to the podium to make our comments?
You can make your comments from wherever you'd like.
We'll follow your lead. All right. We're going to stand. After I move the microphone. That's one thing you need to know about women. We tend to be shorter than men. You'll have to adjust the microphones when you decide to run for office. Let me start officially by saying thank you. Thank you to the mayor for that kind introduction. Thank you to the Lake Forest College for being the host this evening. And thank you to the Lake Forest Caucus for also sponsoring this evening's event. We have been charged with trying to communicate a lot of information relatively quickly so that you have time for questions. And I am very thrilled to be here this evening because I think it's important for women to understand why it is that other women have decided to get into elected office and into government, and hopefully answer some questions, set the stage for them if they have similar ambitions. And so let me start at a place that would make the most sense, and that are some of the formative experiences that I had that eventually led me to the path to run for public office. So everybody in this room probably recognizes that with my last name, I grew up around government. And as I was telling some folks before this event started, that's a good and a bad thing. It's a good thing because you understand the impact that you can have if you're willing to work with government, but it can also be a bad thing in the sense of it's very enlightening in terms of the commitment that you will have, the loss of some of your privacy, the loss of much of your time. So, you know, instead of being at home this evening, I'm here with all of you. And there are certain sacrifices that you have to make if you choose to run for public office and get involved in government that others don't necessarily have. So I'm going to get to those in a moment. But for me, probably the most important experience that I had was the opportunity to work for former U.S. Senator Paul Simon when he was serving as one of our U.S. senators in Washington, D.C. And I was always amazed by Paul. I don't know if any of you had the opportunity to work with him or if any of you knew him, but you know, Paul was, you know, this wonderful man who wore his bow tie and, you know, certainly not the picture of what you would expect of a politician these days. You know, isn't necessarily, you know, the young, good-looking, interested in sound bites kind of individual. Very sincere, very committed, thoroughly believed that anybody has the ability, no matter what their background is, to change the world. And for me, what was so amazing about that is when I went to work with him in D.C., he had put together a staff of people who felt the exact same way. And they were young, just out of college, people who'd worked on his campaign, and they were old, people who'd been in D.C. for years, people who'd worked in Illinois for years. And everybody was really imbued with this sense of purpose and the sense that they could make a difference. And everybody just worked on that. And so after, you know, the first few months, it occurred to me, wow, you really can make a difference. And not only can you make a difference, but you have an obligation to use really the talents that you're given to do that, to make life better for people, to make a difference in this world. And so I eventually decided that one of the things that I would pursue, and I was talking with some folks about this, was I ended up going and serving as a volunteer high school teacher in South Africa. This was in the mid-1980s, at a time when apartheid was still in place, at a time when Nelson Mandela was still in prison. And so the majority of the population in South Africa, 90% of the population, the black South Africans, didn't have a right to vote. They couldn't live where they wanted to live. The opportunities were very limited. The press was censored. There was an extraordinary amount of violence in that country. And I went over there and I served as a volunteer high school teacher. And I was teaching everything. And all I really had to do that was my trusty government degree, which really wasn't fulfilling the purpose of what a teaching degree would have. But when I went over there, I was teaching at an all-girls Catholic high school, and the only other person who had graduated from college was the principal. And so in terms of teaching English, I was rather wonderful at that, being a native speaker of the language. So I was teaching English and math, which I shouldn't have been teaching, and I was teaching earth science, and I was teaching history, and I was our volleyball coach and our faculty liaison to the Young Christian Students Organization. And what was so amazing during this experience is to learn and to see what people are going through who are really in the midst of a liberation struggle, who are really trying to get educated, trying to be part of change, really trying to make a difference for themselves and their families so that they would have a better quality of life and be able to participate in government. And for me, that was a life-changing experience. As much as I was able to impart as a teacher, I ended up learning so much more from that experience. When I came back to Chicago, which is where I'm from, I ended up, as you may have heard if you were paying attention, I ended up going and working on the west side of Chicago. I was working at Wright College, which is one of the community colleges in the city. And the reason I took the job is because they had decided to partner with the Chicago Police Department, in particular the 15th Police District, which is in the Austin community. It's on the far west side of the city. It is an African-American district. And what we were doing was really to pioneer a lot of the community policing strategies that at this point are now citywide. But what I was specifically charged with doing is making sure that after school and on the weekends, kids had a place to go. Kids had something to be engaged in that prevented them from being out on the streets, getting involved with the gangs, and then starting to be scouts, starting to sell drugs, starting to get involved in our criminal justice system, and instead keep them engaged in the education system so that they would have opportunities later in life to go to college, to have a decent job, to earn a living so they could support themselves, support a family, hopefully buy homes. And so those two things, going to South Africa, working on the west side of Chicago, really led me to a point of realizing there's more I can do. But one of the things I wanted, and this isn't true of all women, but for me what I wanted a law degree. And I wanted that because you see in both of those circumstances that you really want to have the law on your side. And so for me, in order to accomplish my goal of helping more people, I went to law school, and I did it at night, and that's another harrowing experience. But you know, it all worked out well. And then I was in private practice for a number of years, and I found that really wasn't where my heart was, where my soul was. And so I decided to run for the state Senate. At the same time, Susan Garrett decided to run for the state Senate, or for the House at the time. And I took a 5-month leave of absence, and I spent every single day knocking on doors of complete strangers, and you have no idea who you're going to meet at a door, or what they're going to be concerned about, or what they're going to say, or what they'll be wearing for that matter. And I say that because sometimes people come to the door without clothes on. So if you're thinking of getting involved in running for public office, be prepared for some rather strange occurrences. Anyway, I won, and I spent 4 years in the state Senate, and then for me, I wanted to be able to do more, and I decided to run for Attorney General. And this is where I'm going to kind of change the topic and talk to you about what you need to know if you're a woman and are thinking about getting involved in government, thinking about running for elected office. Because as I said, there are good things about it and there are bad things about it. So let's start with some of the more difficult aspects of it. If you have a family, if you are married, it would be really, really helpful that your family supports you in your endeavor. And I say that in all sincerity because it is an enormous time commitment. And again, you know, you're not at home to cook dinner. You're not at home to be with your children, to be with your husband. You're not always around when there are family events that people in your family think you need to be there for. And quite frankly, you're not there for events that you want to be there for, but you have other obligations. And the public is very demanding. And so you have to recognize that if you choose to run for public office, if you are lucky enough then to be an elected official, there will be incredible demands made on your time. And for the most part, you have to show up at events. Which leads me to another point that I shouldn't have to tell people, but I have met many candidates that don't seem to realize this. If you choose to run for public office, you need to like people. Right, it should be obvious, but it's not always obvious apparently. You need to like people not just because they expect to be able to engage with you, but you need to like people because you're running to represent them. You're not running for office for yourself and for your personal ambitions. You're running in our democracy to represent them. And so make sure you like people. I've met many candidates who have great ideas, great things they want to achieve. But, you know, when I say to them, so, you know, you need to go out and knock on doors. You need to go to public forums. They'll kind of be dismissive and say, well, you know, but let me talk about my great idea. Like, no. Your great idea, you may have some good ideas, but for the most part, you're going to be getting ideas from people who have ideas. And so, like those people, you have to be willing to engage with those people. Let's get back to things that you won't have. Money. If you, it's true. And I say this as somebody who used to be in private practice as a lawyer. And Susan here can, you know, support me. If I was, and I'm not complaining. I make a very reasonable salary, far more than many people. But if I was in private practice, I could be making 3 or 4 times as much money. And I'm sure by the time my daughter gets to the age where she's going to college, I will wish I was in private practice. And I have seen people who, I've seen judges, I've seen other elected officials who at some point in their lives when this happens, they suddenly look up and say, you know what, I've done my share of public service, and now I'm going back into the private sector. So there is a certain amount of financial sacrifice you will likely make, partly because salaries, you know, aren't extraordinarily high in government work, but also because in addition to that, there's just the time factor. Even if you can, and some people, particularly in the legislature, have 2 jobs, it's just difficult to find the time to do a second job. So you need to be aware of that, again, when looking at, you know, how you want to be able to provide for your family and whether or not there's another income coming in and a way to support yourself. Let me also mention lack of privacy. So, you know, you all are reading the papers right now, there's always a certain amount of, you know, privacy that you sacrifice. Again, it's because you're a public official. It's legitimate. Sometimes it gets quite invasive, but you have to be aware of that, and you have to think to yourself, you know, am I comfortable with that? Do I want to talk about, you know, everything in my life? And as we've seen over the years in not just Illinois, but around the country, you know, have you been divorced? Because apparently ex-spouses, unfortunate, unfriendly sometimes. And we've got some of this going on, I think, even right now in a race that I can think of in the state of Illinois. So, you know, do you have a lot of enemies? Because if you do, you may think twice about what could come out in the midst of a campaign. And I don't mean to be funny. It really is a serious consideration that people have to make. Let me tell you some of the good things. As a woman, there is a greater amount of trust people will have for you initially. And so that's a positive. As a woman, I have also found that we are very passionate about certain issues, and most people, most women who decide to run for public office have been involved civically with some sort of situation, whether it is some of the work that I had done, really pioneering some of the community policing strategies in Chicago, whether it is sitting on a school board, they've gotten involved in an issue. They're very committed, very concerned about that, and that passion and that knowledge really provides them with a base from which they can continue to discuss not just that issue, but advocate on other issues. And so that is, I think, a strength that women have that men don't always actually bring to the table. Sometimes they do, but not always. Quick negative I want to throw in. Even if you have a law degree, even if you have an enormous amount of experience, as a woman, you will be held to a slightly different standard. This will come as no surprise to the women in this room, I think regardless of your age. And it certainly was true in my circumstance. And, I think that was, that compiled, with my last name, made it difficult in some ways through my first campaign, or at least the statewide campaign, because you're attacked for having no experience, in spite of the fact that you can find people who are, I'm 40, you can find people who are much younger than I am, who really don't have experience, and they're men, and they don't necessarily get that type of criticism and that type of commentary. So as a woman, I think it's important that you have a base of knowledge in your issues. I think it's important that you have education. I think it's important that you have experience, whether or not the media and others will give you credit for that. But you need to have that strength of conviction and that knowledge in yourself. And really, that's probably the most important thing that you need. Because what I have found is, in spite of the negatives that I went through, if you have the drive and the desire to make a difference, you'll overcome these hurdles. And they're not insignificant hurdles, but you can overcome those if you understand the difference that you can make, if you understand really what I believe is an obligation, as I talked about at the beginning, this obligation to use our talents that we've been given to change the world and to make it a better place. And as the Attorney General, I have this opportunity every single day on a whole variety of issues, whether it's dealing with sex offenders, dealing with consumer fraud and some of the financially devastating crimes we see in that arena, dealing with methamphetamine, making sure government is more open and accountable. And so for me, in spite of the fact that I'm standing here talking to you tonight, and I have a cold, and I'm in the midst of an election, and I haven't eaten dinner, and I won't get home until 9 o'clock, it's worth it. And you need to know that. So I can't, we'll have questions and answers. I can't, it's hard for me probably to describe the satisfaction that you get when you're able to get up in the morning and know that you have an ability to make a difference and to have a positive impact. But it is something I would encourage all of you, if you have that interest, you have that desire, find a way to get involved. You don't have to be crazy like some of us and run for public office. You can work for government. You can help work on people's staffs. You can get involved in campaigns. And so I would strongly encourage you, if you have the desire, make sure you like people, so try some campaigning. Make sure you enjoy and understand policy, so do some other types of work as well. But if you have any ambition to be doing this type of work, we could definitely use more women, because another great thing about what we're able to do, we open doors for other women. And so as the first female Attorney General, I've been able to put women into positions they've never held in the Attorney General's office, and I guarantee you we're all making a difference. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much to the City of Lake Forest, Lake Forest College, the caucus, and my colleagues, some in Springfield. Arlene, it's great to see you. And Connie, it's great to meet you. I actually got my start right here at Lake Forest College, and it's an interesting story. Now I'm going to have to raise this higher, Lisa. I'm sorry.
Some people are tall.
I got the tall jeans. In 1992, I decided to go back to school. And I had no idea what I was doing in my life. I was a mom. I had 2 great kids. And I was a community activist. Many of you had heard of me. I was always, taking on some of the some local issue, whether it be transportation or environmental or school. And I thought, you know, it's time for me to go back and learn more and do more with my life. And I came over to Lake Forest College, just a couple miles from my house, and Carol Gale, who was a friend of mine, sat down with me, and she said, you know, you should take political science courses. I said, me? And she said, yeah, I think you'd be good at it. I said, really? And she said, yeah, do it. So I did it. I went back and I took only political science courses. I wanted to have a major in political science. And just by being on this campus for 2 years as a part-time student, my world changed. I read about women across the entire globe who ran countries and who made things happen, who had very little knowledge and experience and even connections, but they were able to do it because they were born with some, you know, maybe it was leadership or some desire to really make a difference, is what Lisa was talking about. Especially in Africa, you know, women were not, they were leaders. I mean, we don't think of some of the developing countries as having strong women, but really that's where they are. So I thought, okay, this is something that felt very comfortable to me, and I thought that you don't have to be a, you know, special person. I didn't have my law degree, obviously. But then just after I graduated, and 3 or 4 years later, I'm still doing my community activism. I was president of the League of Women Voters, and I got a call. And the call said, Susan, would you be interested in running for the House? The House of what, I said. They said the House of Representatives in Illinois. You know, and I remember Marianne Pekarik when they asked her once to, wherever she is, I know she's here, and I said, are you crazy? And I remember you had said the same thing when you were thinking about running for mayor or something like that. Maybe it was alderwoman. But it was the last thing on my mind. My goal was to really, through the grassroots, work through different organizations and be a part of a sort of a consensus building group to get things done. So, I'll be honest, I was asked to run as a Democrat. I had voted in both Democratic and Republican primaries, and I wasn't sure what to do because it wasn't something I'd planned out. So I sat down with my husband, who says he's an independent, but then he was a Republican. And I said, I think I'm going to run as a Democrat for the House. He goes, are you crazy? And my kids go, Mom, don't embarrass us anymore. You've been embarrassing us for all these years, and now you're really going to do it to us. So I said, well, just give me a shot. Let me think about it. So I did. And like Lisa, I walked through different neighborhoods. I had a lot of girlfriends that were my moral support, and we knocked on doors. I stood in front of grocery stores and post offices, and you know, part of my district included North Chicago and Waukegan. Nobody had ever heard of me there, and I knew that because I was a white woman from Lake Forest, that maybe they wouldn't be so inclined to really vote for me. So I immersed myself and learned what it was like for them in their communities, and got to know everybody, and really built up a strong trust, as Lisa was talking about. And so I was able to win that race by a small margin, but it did happen. And then I went to Springfield, and through all of my community involvement and my desire to just really be sort of low-key, but to work on local issues. I'm really somebody who cares very much about communities. I went to Springfield, and I'll be honest with you, I was scared to death when I walked in and saw 118 chairs with microphones, and I thought, what am I doing here? I can't do what all of these people can do. I don't have that experience to stand up with a microphone and talk and convince people to vote for a bill that I'm endorsing or supporting. So I was intimidated, and we had like a training period, and that's where I met Lisa, and we learned all about how the legislature works and what the key issues of the state were, and that helped a lot. But it came to actually writing my own legislation, because I didn't have any lobbyists that I knew, and so I went to Springfield with bills about getting trucks in the right-hand lane on 41, and making sure that Waukegan and North Chicago had what we call enterprise zones, which are economic incentives for businesses to locate there. And when I introduced these bills that I wrote myself, I remember especially the trucking type bills. The other side of the aisle, there was one older gentleman who was from Southern Illinois. He said, "Susan, did you always want to play with trucks when you were a little girl and your mother wouldn't let you? And that's why you have so many frustrations with the truckers?" So those were the kinds of things that sort of came my way. I learned to speak fairly well, and what made that change for me, not having any public speaking experience, was that I just reminded myself what it was like growing up in my family. Not that it was dysfunctional, but it was a family that kind of fought for their own issues, and you had to really do a good job if you wanted to convince your father, your mother, your sister, your brother what it was you were trying to do. And I think, honestly, that experience helped me more than anything. So I just looked at these guys, most of them. There's only 20% of the General Assembly is comprised of women. So I would look at this, sort of gloss over, and just think I was at my kitchen table and just talk, and, put on my gloves. And so I was able to be successful on some of the issues that I really cared about. But it wasn't easy. Sometimes I would pinch myself when they started throwing stuff at me and just keep a smile on my face. But I've learned a lot since I've been in Springfield, both in the House and the Senate, that working with both sides of the aisle, Republicans and Democrats, men and women, that's the key to getting something done. And women, in my mind, do it better than men. They're more consensus builders. They really try hard to get the job done. They're not so concerned about being recognized and getting credit and things like that. Women generally, work together no matter what their party affiliation is. And that's a credit, I think, to the 20% of us that are in Springfield, that we have built a coalition. We have a group called Conference of Women Legislators, which Lisa was the co-chairman of when you were in the Senate. And it's a great group of women who come together and raise money and give to different kinds of causes and programs depending on what the year is. So I really, I think that's how I got started, and that's what was important to me. It still remains my top priority to work with my community, to work in my county, to work again in the region. Arlene and I have worked on transportation issues. She's not in my district, I'm not in hers, but we get along really well and have some great conversations about how to get rid of the gridlock that faces all of us. And that's the key, to work together. Women have different challenges. I think Lisa did a really good job of pointing that out, but they're not insurmountable. Because in Springfield at least, and I think in Lake Forest or wherever we are, we tend to support one another. And that's sometimes really what it does take, but it works. And I'm proud to be here tonight. I'm proud to be able to serve and represent many of you in the General Assembly, and I thank you for this opportunity tonight.
Well, let's see, I'm in the middle here. I just returned from a wonderful vacation in Italy, and as someone who's been 5'4" since I was 13, I went to a Sicilian wedding, and I looked to my husband about halfway through the ceremony, and I said, "I've got a really strange experience going on right here." And he looked at me, I said, "I feel tall." Women and men did not exceed my shoulder. It was really interesting. So I'm in the middle tonight. Thank you. I also want to just say ditto with all the thanks to the mayor and the college and the caucus. It is truly an honor for me to be on a panel with such esteemed, accomplished women. I know, just to recap of how we're all connected, even though I'm in Arlington Heights and these are, well, we're all kind of spread out. But when Lisa says you've got to go places and you have to like people, one of the first times, other than being on one of your committees on the phone, you came to support WINGS, which is Women in Need Growing Stronger. It's a shelter. And we had a wonderful fundraiser, and we were so pleased to have our Attorney General come and support this fundraising event, but more or less the women who needed it. And Susan is one of those people who I met when she was a rep, and I really liked her, and I was kind of excited that she was running for the Senate, even though I'm not of that persuasion. When you start working on issues, you know, the D's and R's sort of go away. It's about serving the people. And I don't want to be redundant because I think both of these presentations have been great, but I guess I'll focus maybe a little bit on the local government. And going to Springfield was always a challenge as a mother of three. And I never fathomed. I didn't have that interest. I didn't have a pull. And I have to give Lake Forest a lot of credit because as I went off to college a long, long time ago, my first major was political science. It lasted one semester. I said, oh no, this is boring. And I chose rather to go more into a pre-med, and when my father said I couldn't get married till I was finished with all my schooling, I decided to be a science and physical education teacher instead. When I came home from a leave of absence from my third and final, I think, yes, pregnancy, I was sort of just enjoying being a stay-at-home mom. Can you figure that? And I had some friends knock on my door and said, you know, they're looking for someone as a park district commission. And I said, what? What is that? I was too busy driving all the way to Skokie to teach every day for 6-7 years and really hadn't paid attention to a lot of these elected positions. So they said, oh, just throw your hat in the ring and see what happens. Well, it didn't take long, but they thought, oh, here's someone who has no agenda, no baggage, nothing to do. So I was appointed with the intent of serving the 2 years and going back to work. Well, I found that I really liked being home, and I liked being a park commissioner because, yes, indeed, I love people, especially two groups, young teenagers. That's what was my career, was working with students, and I did some coaching. So we did teaching and we did coaching, and I'm real proud of the girls with whom I was able to work with, and they accomplished great things because I felt that maybe if any quality I have is that I'm a motivator, and I can empower people, and I get other people to do a lot of things. And I've been the mayor 14 years, and people say, oh, we've changed, Arlington Heights has really changed. And I said, well, I didn't do much. I just sort of orchestrated and asked people to come. And a lot of government service is that's what you're doing. You're getting more people involved. Opportunities come your way, and I gave a talk once. They wanted to know a little about me. Well, I'm pretty simple. How many of you here grew up on a farm? Oh, I guess I'm the only one. How many of you milk cows? Okay, that was probably me too. I never fathomed. All right, yes. Never fathomed of working in government, but did plan to work with people, always. And I got very involved in the community, and during the campaign, it's amazing how if you go back into your history, if you do choose to run or take an appointment, that's always the easy way to slide in. Remember all those people you worked with. I never dreamt that the reason I would win an election over the hometown boy, born, raised, father very loved, how was I going to defeat him? First, he was the number one, but my campaign people never told me I was didn't have a chance. But anyway, we did. We won. And it was because I had been in PTA for 18 years. Well, not then, but lots. I was in League of Women Voters. I was in AUW, BPW. You name it, I was a joiner. I belonged to all these wonderful groups. And you know, I was a regular churchgoer, and I happened to have friends through a lot of these other organizations. I'm in PEO, and I had a lot of contacts, and all of these people belonged to all the other churches. And suddenly, I had support in more corners than I ever thought. And so the first time I ran, and I had planned not to run, I said, why would anyone that has any sense put their name on a ballot, giving everybody the opportunity to reject you? It's a very scary thing.
I thought of it that way.
Well, I have to say that the first 3 times as a park commissioner, I was always running for a seat, so that was a little bit easier for me. I didn't have to run against a person. So that you just hope to come in the top 3 voters and you got elected. After those 3 times, that was 12 years on the park board, the mayor said, well, you know, I want some people to run for trustee. We're a small village, Arlington Heights, just 80,000 people, you know, we're the village. And I need people that I know. So it was a huge election, I think 6 or 7 candidates, 4 seats. And I said, well, I'm so happy, and I'm in the middle of a term at the parks. And he said, no, you got to do this. So I threw my hat in the ring and won, and then it was very sad. I had to leave what I just loved, and I questioned myself. Why would I leave the opportunity to make people happy by building playgrounds and parks, have Halloween parties? Instead, I went to sewers, gutters, and snow removal. But, you don't know what you're missing until you miss it, you know. I think some of all of this takes courage and then control of your life. And I looked up some quotes that I wanted to share that were all by women. One is about Ginger Rogers. If you ever think to question about your qualifications and your ability to do something, just remember, Ginger Rogers did everything Fred Astaire did, but she did it backwards and in high heels. But Fred was the big dancer. Another one that I thought was about how you can control your lives and maybe satisfy your doubts is when nothing is sure, everything is possible, which means you can be successful. We all know that we want to represent and work with people, and you have a fine mayor, but you're a man, I believe, you know, and then the community is made up of men and women. And we've all heard about Venus and Mars, and, you know, we just sort of think differently and we see things differently. So if a community is made up of men and women, shouldn't their leaders be men and women? So that as you are pondering, no one knows all the answers, and that's why when you have a board or a council, you hope that you have more than one perspective and that they're not, no offense, all lawyers or all realtors, that you hope you have a little bit of diversity. I think that the biggest challenge that I feel like I'm the luckiest person in the world to have grown up on a farm and then gone to the big city of San Francisco. I'm a Californian too, sorry about that. It was a whole new world for me. And I decided I was never going to be afraid to walk through a door and not know what's on the other side, because I could always turn around and walk back. But not knowing what's on the other side would always bother me. So I think my life has just been full of great opportunities because I haven't been afraid to walk through the door. And that first election was the scariest thing. Running for mayor, I had absolutely I was petrified. It was 4 people, and I sat down with my family. And one of the reasons I made the decision is I had daughters who already were in college. I had one young man who was in middle school. And I said, you're the most important vote. And you have to organize your time. And many people, I've been mayor for 14 years, people keep saying, well, when are you going to run for state office? When are you going to go to something bigger? Why aren't you in Washington? I promised my son I wouldn't miss one of his tennis matches. And in his senior year, he was #1 tennis player, and I did not miss one of his tennis matches. We just put it in the schedule. It was an important meeting, and I was there. And you have to do those kinds of things. You can't abnegate everything. But we got a lot of husbands home tonight. Mine is having Campbell soup again. He's done that Monday night, too, because that's our board meetings. And he has a lot of patience, and thankful to him, though, I can do what I do. And I do devote a lot of time to going to events, but the two qualities that I think are the most important if you're going to be in public office is the willingness to read, because you do have to educate yourself on the issues, and you have to go beyond what's just always laid out. You have to do research. Second most important thing, and I tell this to all the little Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts, is that you have to listen. If you don't listen to your constituents, you won't last long. You have to know what's important. And that's why it's important to go to the events, because you get in all these little small talks and you can just kind of listen a lot of times, which isn't always easy because everybody wants you to talk. But listen to what they think is important and remember it. You have to really, I think the best qualifications to be a public servant is to have been a volunteer, because you know what it's like to give. You don't give to get an award or a plaque. You give because it feels good inside. In fact, when you can do something that you don't get recognition, sometimes that makes you feel the best. There's value to everything you do, and you have to know that you're going to have to do homework. Boards and commissions. I have the opportunity to appoint more than 140 people, and I appoint people I've never met before, but if they're expressed an interest, I have an interview. I have 5 criteria. Gender balance is one of them, that I try to make sure that I have gender balance in all of them. Geographic distribution, because we have such a big community. I want to make sure every neighborhood is represented. Their professional background should be varied. How long they've served, and their age. I don't want everybody over 40 or under 40. I want to make sure. We have a lot of young people in our community. We need that voice as well. So I try to take all of those things in hand. And I think as a citizen, you have to think about, do you have a responsibility maybe to serve? I have a quote from Eleanor Roosevelt, which I think is quite fitting. It's not fair to ask of others what you are not willing to do yourself. So when you're critical, we always hear people who are most critical sometimes, you look up, they never show up and vote. And people always say, if you don't vote, you don't have the right to criticize those who are in office. I think that's very, very important, and I too do feel that most people are motivated because they do feel the sense of being able to make a difference. And some of the smallest things that has never been written in the newspaper or listed in any minutes are the ones I'm most proud of. It's those little people that ask for something, and I don't ever fix anything, because that's not good. I don't do tickets and I don't give jobs. But I'm a conduit, and I hear the people, I see the staff, and I can find someone who can resolve someone's problem. And that's what makes me feel good, and I feel that I've been able to help in some way. And I can't say that anything bad, that I'm so happy that I walked through that door and put my name on that ballot the very first time. It was never an issue about being a woman, although I was the first woman to be elected. There were 2 women running, 2 men running. It was real challenging. I've loved the experience, and I hope as long as my community allows me, I'm going to continue. My 3 children, the last one's getting married in 3 weeks, and so I won't have those to worry about. I just have grandchildren. It's hard to judge ourselves, but I think we know what makes us feel good. And making someone else smile and feel good about themselves, and the ability to empower someone and see them grow into a leader is something that makes us feel good. And I'll leave with you with 2 messages, one from Helen Reddy. The most exciting thing about women's liberation is that this century will be able to take advantage of talent and potential genius that have been wasted because of old taboos. And the last, Jacqueline Bisset. Character contributes to beauty. It fortifies a woman as her youth fades. It's me. A mode of conduct, a standard of courage, discipline, fortitude, and integrity can do a great deal to make a woman beautiful. Thank you.
think I'm representing a different facet of public service. My part tonight is to get people to volunteer on the community level and work within the community. It may take you to where Lisa and Susan are, but my part tonight is to explain to you how our caucus works and to try to encourage people to get involved. And the idea for this event grew from our mayor's awareness and concern that while we were giving him lists of extremely able, qualified individuals for him to appoint, these lists included very few women. Where were the women, he asked. We all know what a driving force women are in this community, and yet local government was not drawing any participation, or very little. Therefore, we talked it over, and the idea to approach this on a more personal level and to help everyone to understand the role of the caucus committee and how to get involved evolved into this evening. So we have our mayor and his ideas to thank for this. And this evening, my job is I've been asked to explain the workings of the Lake Forest Caucus Committee. And this committee serves as a personnel search organization whose primary purpose is to find qualified individuals to serve on the city's 140 volunteer elective and appointed positions, plus any ad hoc committees that come up. Now, all of these boards and commissions work collectively with the community at large and with our extremely qualified professional Lake Forest City staff. The origin of the caucus committee was a response, now almost 80 years ago, to a growing community's needs. The caucus is predated in Lake Forest only by the city council, the library board, which was formed in 1872, the cemetery board in 1881, and the zoning board of appeals in 1923, with the caucus arriving on the scene soon after the Plan Commission came into being in 1926. In a young, smaller Lake Forest, it had been easier to identify and recruit volunteers, but as the population grew, this became more difficult and a more efficient procedure was necessary. The caucus system provided the answers and the process. All registered voters in Lake Forest are members of the caucus. Now, by law, only registered voters may serve on boards and commissions or in elected positions. Now, our goal is to make everyone aware of the process and of the opportunities to get involved. The city is divided into 4 wards, and 9 members represent each ward. These 36 people, plus 6 executive board members, compose the Caucus Committee on Candidates, which is usually simply called the Caucus Committee. This is the governing body of the caucus. The caucus has worked to encourage resident participation in local affairs and to identify, interview, and match abilities with current community needs. This system is nonpartisan, supports no platform or agenda, takes no stand on public issues, and receives no support from public funds. And you ask, what do they do? Again, we're a search committee. Recently, we compiled a profile of the current 42 members of the Lake Forest Caucus, and I'm going to give you a summary of just a couple of those to show you our diversity. The age range for the 42 caucus members is from 30 to 70 plus years, with the average being 40 to 60. 56% of the people have lived in Lake Forest between 5 and 15 years. 57% of the people grew up somewhere other than the Chicagoland area. 93% have at least one college degree, and the other 7% have some certification. Only 25% are women. And this last figure is reflective of a similar percentage of women on the boards and commissions in the city, with some of the boards having no female representation. The process to get involved isn't difficult. Along with information that you get every year from the city in the annual directory and our twice yearly Caucus Connection newsletters, which are mailed to every household in Lake Forest, and public notices, there is a caucus website, lfcaucus.com. Interested individuals are asked to access the website, read the information, and fill out our volunteer profile sheet. The website is comprehensive and confidential, and it provides us with a permanent database for our research. An actual personnel search begins when a board or commission has a vacancy. And the first question we ask is, what expertise is needed to fill the post and to maintain a successful skills and abilities balance? As the mayor mentioned, we also strive for a geographic representational balance. So we next identify which wards should be the first to seek candidates. The 9-member ward committees are the first to contact and interview prospective members. If a ward determines that an interview presents a possible replacement on the board or commission, the volunteer is requested to interview with the full caucus committee. From these interviews, a list of candidates is prepared and presented to the mayor. The mayor may or may not conduct some of his own interviews from this list. Appointments are usually made in May, with the change of seats occurring in June. In addition to the appointment process, the caucus does place names on the ballot in the spring election. These are for mayor, aldermen, and members of the school boards of District 115 and 67. Thus, the caucus is recognized by the state of Illinois as a special political entity. We're called a qualified political organization. This means that although we have no political affiliation, no agenda or platform, and conduct no primary elections, we do fill slots on the ballot. We use the same recruit and review interview approach as we use in the boards and commissions to find people to put on the ballot. In addition to this, the wards independently screen prospective members for their wards. Interviews, again, are the primary selection tool. The term limit on the ward committees is 1 3-year term, with a third of the membership overturning every year. An election ballot for this is included in our spring Caucus Connection newsletter, and selection is decided by the result of the returned mail-in ballots. All positions, appointed and elected, have term limits. Most boards and commissions have terms of 2 or 3 years, with the possibility of a reappointment to a maximum of 6 years. These term limits are in place and are hopefully will provide for more individual community members' involvement. As needs change in Lake Forest, and they do, the caucus adapts and helps. Boards may be added, as was the Historic Preservation Committee in 1999. More recently, the mayor requested that we seek local attorneys to serve on a new standing advisory committee. The 5-member legal committee was seated in April 2006. A new focus this year is an ad hoc committee, an environmental council. Now, all caucus information that I've been giving you this evening is on the lfcaucus.com website, and the Fall Caucus Connection was delivered to your homes this week. Included in that was a volunteer profile sheet if you prefer to use stamped mail rather than the email. As a final note, I can tell you from my personal experience that serving on the caucus has been extremely rewarding and an enjoyable way to get involved in my community. I've learned more about this city than I could any other way. I've learned about the city, I've learned to understand the problems and the actions that are taken, and I really feel like I'm making a difference on a much more grassroots level, and it's very gratifying. So please read your Caucus Connection, browse the website, and take time to fill in a VPS for us, because we need all of you. Thank you.
Oh, no, that's okay. I'm not going to stand on ceremony. I'm Susan Franzetti. I'm chair of the 4th Ward Caucus Committee, so I am a member of Connie's caucus, and I hope this has been helpful to everybody tonight. I know it's been helpful to me. I'm a neophyte too. I started late in life, heading into my 5th decade on this planet, and joined the caucus just last year. And so a lot of this has been helpful to me because it's been my first foray into serving at all in anything connected with local government. So now we're going to open it up for questions. And we're not going to go too long because I promised the mayor I'd get him home in time to watch the Oprah rerun at 11 o'clock. It's been a lot of male bashing, so I thought, maybe I should show your sensitive side. But with that, does anyone have any questions for our panel? Don't be shy. All right, I actually have one. Susan, I heard you mention League of Women Voters, and Arlene, I heard you mention League of Women Voters. And I know I've read the backgrounds of other women in government and often seen the League of Women Voters. And since that sounds like maybe one of the good places to get one's feet wet, can you address why we see that a lot in the early years of women serving in government?
Well, is this on? Yeah. For me, it was an opportunity, really an outlet to get involved in a nonpartisan way, to understand what the issues are at the grassroots level, and to really do something about it. I got involved with candidate forums and hearing what the local issues are. The League always comes up with sort of a program every year of what issues they're going to address. And I really liked it. I really liked the idea of working on these issues, not having the pressure of running for an office, and actually getting the job done and seeing the results. And it's a unique organization because while there's politics, it's not political. And I see Happy Dot in the audience, and I know she's been very involved over the years as well. But it's a great organization for women who are simply interested in public policy and politics, and it gives you a way to get involved and get your feet wet and see if it's something you want to pursue.
You did a great job. I got involved once I was home from work and as a park commissioner, because there's not a lot of politics. Well, all of the positions that I've held have been nonpartisan. So I felt very comfortable with the League of Women Voters because they did deal with policy and it was nonpartisan. And it allowed me to see research and get a broader picture from just my little corner of the world, the village of Arlington Heights, because they were bigger issues. AUW as well was a good exposure for me. And that I've been a member of since 1970. And that was, I joined when I was a stay-at-home mom with babies. I just needed to be able to use my university training to have a decent conversation intellectually with people. And so sometimes I think a lot of people get involved as a precursor to maybe their interest in service. And it is a great way. I've never thought about it as a stepping stone, though. It was kind of an interesting question.
Yes, Melanie.
harsher sides of a political life, and I'd be very interested if you would, maybe each of you address that topic a little bit.
Let me start. And the reason I want to start is because I actually wrote that down and realized it was something that I didn't say. But your observation, I think, is correct in the sense of if you are going to put yourself out there, and I think the mayor said it well, suddenly this thought of people might reject you. and nobody wants to be rejected. So you absolutely have to develop a thick skin and not take things personally. And here's how you do it. And for me, it's easy. I spoke with you earlier about the work that I had done in South Africa. And I also spoke with you about how you have to know why it is you're doing what you're doing. And you have to believe in yourself. And if you believe in yourself and your mission, then you really almost can't put those blinders on and get up every day and do the work that's necessary to put you in a position to help people. And, I certainly 4 years ago went through an extraordinarily nasty campaign, 2 nasty campaigns. But in spite of that, I now have an opportunity every single day to help not just a few people, we help millions of people when it comes to the advocacy work we do and the legislative work we do and the grant funding that we provide, and it's so satisfying. So you have to, maybe just the best way to look at it is you have to know what you're doing and you have to know why you're doing it. And if you have that inside of yourself, you're pretty strong, regardless of what's thrown at you. But you really, really have to believe in yourself, and that allows you to recognize that some of the criticism that you hear is completely unfounded, and proceed on with getting your message out and making sure that you're successful so that you can help other people. But I think it's a very, very important point. But I would also say, in regards to the other part of your statement about, sometimes women are more sensitive, and I laugh because we were talking about this before the program started, and this wasn't very long ago. So 15 years ago, when I was in law school looking to work in a litigation department at a major law firm in the city, I had the head of that law firm, or maybe it was the head of the litigation department, look at me and say, now, litigators, it's a lot of battle. It's real rough, and I don't want any women who are going to cry. So if you're a crier, and we've had them, we don't want you to sign up. And I thought, wow, that's fascinating, do we? So, there are plenty of women out there who are tough. And it's a necessary thing, which doesn't mean you're not compassionate or concerned. But when you believe in what you're doing and you believe in yourself, you almost naturally develop the thick skin that you're talking about.
Maybe I'm the exception to the rule. I have to tell you that I'm still overly sensitive, and maybe I had some bad campaigns where I would, at 2 o'clock in the morning be channel surfing. I'd see my picture on TV, and it was all grainy, and it did look like me, and it really stuck with me. And it was hard to shake off. And
Well, don't look at those pictures.
well, I wasn't blaming it. I was channel surfing. They did appear to
Keep
before
moving.
I wish I could be tougher, actually, when it comes to, I can handle, the back and forth, the dialogue and the debate in Springfield, but I think campaigns are tough, and it's tough for somebody to go after your character and all of that. I feel that I'm unflappable 90% of the time, but there are times when it hurts. Tears will come to my eyes. I'll be honest with you, and I'll talk to my husband. I'll call my husband up. Can you believe this? And you know what? It's part of who we are. One of the things that I do to get through this is I read. I read about other women and their struggles and how they've had to deal with difficulties, whether they're public officials or just public figures in some way. So I think it's important, as much as I would like to be as tough as nails, I know I'm not. In a way, I say to myself, maybe that's good. Maybe that sensitivity is important, because when you are working on issues and you have to deal with a lot of different levels of people's concerns, if you're not sensitive to what they're experiencing, how then maybe could I wouldn't be such a good public servant. So as I want to be tougher and stronger and less, sensitive to these things, but on the other hand, I think it serves me well in many ways.
I mentioned the word balance, and I think that's an extraordinarily important one. And I think sometimes the sensitivity, if it gets too far, there's always a man somewhere in a group that I'm working on that says, come on, just go with it, it'll be okay. And it sort of reminds you not to be too sensitive. But there are many, many times that there are many, many hurts. And because we're a public official, we're a target. People say things, and you can't really respond as much as you'd like. That has nothing to do with whether you're female or male. I'm sure the mayor has that too. Our meetings are live on the evening that they are occurring, and we're dealing with something called Citizens to be Heard right now. And people have chosen to come and make personal accusations against our elected officials and myself. Just to give you one example, talking about whether I broke an ethics law about voting on the hospital. And they stood up and swore that I was on the hospital corporate board. Twice I said, no, I'm not on the corporate board. I have no say on what the hospital does. I am on the foundation board that raises money for programs for children to go visit the hospital and not be afraid, and give scholarships, and they always call on the mayor to raise money, right? And this person said, no, you're wrong, Mayor. I know, I saw your name on 2 lists. At that point, I denied it twice. I decided, thank you very much, because this citizen obviously knew more than I did. They're wrong, but you just take it. And I had someone say that I denied meeting with them. Well, I meet with everyone, contrary to my staff's advice. And it's, I try to think of as a bird with feathers and rain. You try to say, I tell myself, they really didn't mean it. If they knew everything I knew, they wouldn't have said that. You do a lot of rationalization and pretend, but I think it still hurts. Probably the thing, and someone said we have passion. I think the passion of knowing that you're doing something right gives you the strength to endure some of these hurts. But the one that I feel is so difficult for me to accept is that when I talked about the Mars and the Venus, there are characteristics about men, they only see big pictures and they're not into details. Women can be very catty, and they can be very catty to other women. And most of the great accomplishments I've done, I've had men behind me. Men helped me with my coaching. Men were I had huge male support for my candidacy as mayor. And women were my supporters as well, but they were some of my biggest critiquers that, gee, your hair doesn't look right today. What? Didn't you wear that last week? And it's at the local level, the grocery store, because not only do we have our meetings cabled, but we repeat them 4 times a day. So if you have insomnia at 3 in the morning, you can watch the board meeting. And people say, oh, we watch, and then we talk about your jewelry, your hair, your clothes, even your tone of voice, And I'm going, okay, I'm just a local person, but I see these people in the grocery store, on the street, at any event that you go, and they're always looking at it. So you live in a fishbowl. You really do. And I wrote all the things that Lisa talked about were the negatives, and there were a lot more negatives than positives. So you know that the passion has to be really burning within inside you, and to do it, because I can't get away from my constituents. Sometimes I'm envious of the people that go to D.C. and Springfield. You might be able to go out one evening and not see a constituent, but they're the people I'm working for, and so whatever they say, I probably should be listening to. But I've been doing this, the 14 and the 12 come up to 26, 27 years now, and it still hurts.
Well, let me follow up quickly, because to some extent, there are certainly days where it feels like high school never ended. And in terms of like kind of the catty, petty sort of, you know, annoyances that you contend with. And you really learn in the midst of a campaign who your friends are. You know, a lot of people who say they're your friends and then suddenly, you know, they're not there to help. Or folks that, you know, you didn't really know that were so supportive of you and they show up to help. So it's a very interesting and in some points disheartening experience in that regard. But yeah, and the TV thing, TV is a cruel medium. It adds a lot of weight. And I will tell you, the number one comment that I get when I bump into folks when they're honest is, oh, you're so much thinner in person, and it's shorter, and I hear that a lot. So, there you go. TV is a cruel medium. Don't watch yourself.
I got 2 more years before I watch it.
Any other questions? Maddie, did you?
I would have one comment
Oh.
that no one's mentioned, instead of tears. I think you know you have to learn the ability to laugh at yourself. I mean, I'm on a different plane with you all, but when I make a mistake in the committee meeting, I think sometimes the best thing is just to laugh it off. I did it, and go on. You can't agonize over it if you said something that didn't quite turn out right or something. But maybe that's on the level I am. What's this?
I learned to laugh because I thought, and I had had the opportunity to learn this sport during my Park District days, but some of the developers and the community leaders and chamber people said, gee, Mayor, how do we now like relate to you? Because we can't slap you on the back and, you know, let's go have a cigar. Let's just meet in the tavern. What are we gonna do? And I said, well, I play golf. And so while I'm playing golf, I laugh a lot. It's really interesting because I did make a concerted effort to try to have a way to relate to the other gender and have them feel comfortable with me. So,
Good advice.
yeah.
I think we have another question here from Maddie, do we?
What would you say to the woman who's feeling a little shy about and maybe not qualified enough to serve even at a grassroots level? Should they just jump in somewhere and get started, or attend more meetings and learn, or what? Do you have any feelings about how to get started?
Sure. My advice would be volunteer. So, you know, call Susan Garrett's office. I mean, every elected official wants people to help. And, you know, it doesn't necessarily need to be a paid position, so you don't have to make a commitment that you don't want to have to get out of. But it will provide you with an opportunity to learn more, both about, you know, the workings of an office as well as the policy issues in an office. And, you know, for many people, that's how they got lured into these situations in the first place. They decided to go and volunteer, develop their skills, and then boom, you know, someone's calling them on the phone. Hey, you want to run for the House? And you're like, House of what? And so to me, that's the best thing you can do. And it's, you know, you can look up a few weeks later and say, you know, I don't enjoy this. But if you do enjoy it, then it opens up so many doors. And when you end up meeting people and those opportunities, you know, as you've heard from Connie, they're out there. I didn't, you know, even from the mayor. Would you say you appoint 140 people to boards and commissions? Mayor, how many do you appoint?
I appointed all those people.
Yeah. Well, but that was for Arlington Heights. I mean,
140.
oh, okay. I'm sorry. I thought that was.
They're the same.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So clearly there's this enormous need for talented, committed people to do work, and it's not that scary. You know? I mean, particularly if you're holding an appointed office, it's, you know, you're not dealing with that type of, you're not dealing with the rejection that some of us talked about. You know, really in that capacity, you're trying to move an agenda forward and do something that's good, and everyone's trying to work toward a common goal. So in that regard, it's just a great opportunity to get involved.
I would just add that, you know, I get letters, I
people who are interested, and I meet along and I drop hints, and sometimes I have the newspaper write an article that I'm looking, that have vacancies in zoning board of appeals, or we have a senior commission and a youth commission, so I'm always getting high school kids, because I have one kid, he swears he only got into West Point because he was on our youth commission for 3 years, and he demonstrated tremendous leadership. But, you know, it sounds to me, through here in Lake Forest, you write to the caucus, you fill out one of those forms, and because those are then conveyed to the mayor, and then he can call in the interviews, because that is so essential. When I look at what's happened in our community during my tenure, it's because of things that have gotten through Plan Commission. We have a design commission made up of architects. And, you know, I ran into the grocery parking lot. A young lady introduced herself to me and said, I'm a friend of your daughter's friend, and she said that if I told you I wanted to be on a commission, you would be on. I said, well, what are you? She goes, I'm an architect. So at 29, she went on the design commission, and she's been phenomenal. And I just recently moved her to Plan Commission. So I have two architects on my Plan Commission, because we're really fussy about how things look. I'm sure you are too. But, you know, sometimes you just go up and say you want to do this. And it sounds like Connie will be a good resource for you.
Time for one more question. You heard what time a lot of these women's days started this morning, and I want to give them the opportunity to finally get home. But any last question? Yes?
Are any of you afraid that when you go into the job for the first day that you're not going to actually know how to do it, or are you going to wonder how do you be a mayor or an attorney general or something like that?
The mayor here is raising his hand. That's a gender-neutral question.
I certainly felt like an imposter math teacher. Yeah, truly, I mean, you know, I never excelled in algebra and things, and suddenly I found myself teaching that. But you learn, and you know, I mean, to the extent that you've gone to school and learned other things and mastered other subjects or jobs, it's the same circumstance, just a different venue. And I mean, I think Susan probably did the most beautiful job of really talking about, you know, her apprehension when she was suddenly confronted with, you know, a room with 118 desks and everybody has microphones, and oh my gosh, you know, what are you going to do? But I mean, Susan's incredibly intelligent and astute, and I mean, she's really one of the top legislators when it comes to, you know, and the mayor said, which I thought was kind of beautiful, you have to read. So I mean, it's this constant learning process. But you know, you've got the capacity to do it. I mean, you wouldn't be sitting here if you didn't have some interest and ability, unless you got dragged in, you know, by the president here, saying, "Oh, come on, we need to fill up the room." So you can do this, and sure, everyone's a little apprehensive, but when you start, but you take to it.
I guess I would add that I was lucky enough to sort of figure out how I was going to be a legislator. I don't think there's really a job description. There aren't really qualifications, but when you do, if you are fortunate enough to be elected into office, you can determine how your office is going to be run, what kind of services you're going to provide, how accessible are you going to be to the public. And everybody had this common theme about liking people and listening to what their concerns are. I think that's absolutely critical if you're going to be a public servant, whether you're being appointed to a local board or commission or an attorney general. You have to really be able to go out and talk to people and listen to them. But I think every lawmaker that I know has their own style, and they are who they are. They run their office basically on their instincts and what interests they have. Some people are better at it than others, but it comes down to being accountable ultimately to the people, but also, you know, having a relationship with them, and that's what leads to being an excellent public servant.
When I got the concession call from the major opponent, I was elated for almost 60 seconds. And the thought occurred to me, and I thought I was going to go through the floor and say, oh my goodness, how do I do this job? And
it was a scary moment. But I think Susan just captured it, and when you look at Susan, it's kind of hard to look at her without her smiling.
That's why I'm watching those commercials at 2.
Be yourself. You know, you have to be who you are. I learned that in teaching and coaching. You can't steal someone else's style. You have to be yourself. And the people who helped you get elected will be there for you. And I was very fortunate about that. And they help you and guide you, and you'll be yourself, and you'll create out the way you want to do things, and then you'll be very successful.
Can
I just make one more comment? One of the things I wanted to say that I didn't get a chance to say is that I think women do bring a very different perspective to the table, no matter how they serve at what level. And it's what matters is that we generally have children at home. We have the school issues. We understand how important education is. We understand about public safety, and we bring that perspective to any kind of volunteer position or elected level. And I think that's what really separates women from their male counterparts, is that they feel differently about some of the issues, and they know them differently. And I think that whole perspective is really important. And that's why I would encourage women, no matter if they feel like they have the confidence or not, to seek a position, try to get on a commissioner board or run for office.
Thank you, Susan. I want to thank all our panelists for being here tonight. It really is wonderful. And Connie, thank you for your introduction as to why we did this. I just want to throw a personal note in here. Women in government is something that's important. As Connie mentioned, we do not get a lot of people applying for the boards commission. I really wanted to see women involved because they're an important, integral part of the community. But I stand here today because of women in government. I'm going to tell a story real quickly. My wife was chairman of the school board for a number of years, and it wasn't me that called to run for alderman. It was her. And she said, no way, but here's my husband, he'll run. So the reason I am here today is because of women in government. And I think it's important for all women to be involved. I think it's important for everyone to be involved. Having spousal support is, as you said, just a paramount thing, and I have support every day that I do my job, so it makes it a little easier for me. But thank you all for coming tonight. And I do have to